Adams' presidency, we'll see significant and important accomplishments, but also we'll see some things that cause us to maybe think less of John Adams. John Adams' greatest accomplishment is to keep us out of the Anglo-French War that we talked about a few lectures ago. This leads us to something that we call the quasi-war. Now, the Jay and the Pinckney treaties had smoothed things over with Great Britain, which is what Hamilton had wanted, but they didn't do anything to help our situation with the French, and the French are still attacking and taking American ships. France refuses to meet with our ambassador, who's Charles Coatsworth Pinckney. This is a relative of Thomas Pinckney's, unless America will give him a bribe. Now, Pinckney then writes a letter back to John Adams explaining the situation, that 3 French government officials are demanding bribes to negotiate with us. And he doesn't say their names because that would be dishonorable. He calls them XYZ. And that gives us something that we call the XYZ affair, which is nothing more than French diplomats demanding bribes before they'll talk to us. Charles Coatsworth Pinckney, John Marshall, and Elbridge Gerry are the American diplomats trying to arrange these negotiations, and the French minister named Talleyrand is who's demanding bribes. Pinckney says, no, not a sixpence, and this becomes kind of a great battle cry for the anti-French forces here in America. Adams simply takes this report and releases it to the public because Adams was not on the French side. He was pro-British. Adams then urges Congress to begin preparations for war. The public is, of course, outraged when they hear what France has done. And then we have this undeclared war with France, and that's what the quasi-war is. It's a war on the seas. Our ships are attacking their ships and vice versa, but there is no declaration of war. This leads to the creation of the American Navy, by the way. The Department of Navy is created in response to the quasi-war. We cut off trade with France. Our treaty with France gets canceled. After they helped us in the Revolutionary War, we would promise that we would be their ally forever. That lasts all the way until the late 1790s. We'll capture 85 French overall, although they'll capture more of ours. And we begin to move closer to an alliance with Great Britain. The war between the French and the British will end when the French General Napoleon rises to power and seizes control of the French state. This will, of course, dissipate all this tension between America, Britain, and France, or at least most of it anyway. And a new treaty will be signed, establishing that we will be allies with France, but we will not. We will trade with France, but we will not be military allies. Now, during the war, John Adams, who was always incredibly sensitive of criticism, would push through Congress 2 bills called the Alien and Sedition Acts. In 1798, the quasi-war, our bad feelings towards the French, will lead the Federalists to win more elections and gain more seats in Congress and the Senate. And they move to destroy the Democratic-Republican Party for good. The Alien Act says it will take 14 years to become a citizen, and therefore 14 years of you being an American before you can vote, and immigrants tended to vote overwhelmingly for the Democratic-Republicans. They also said that the president can deport anyone he wants, any immigrant he wants, on suspicion. He doesn't have to explain why or prove anything. Adams doesn't do this, I should point out, but the power, the threat, is enough to create a huge backlash. The Sedition Act says the government can prosecute you and jail you for criticizing the government. Of course, the Democratic Republicans call this tyranny. 10 newspaper editors were arrested for criticizing John Adams. But the response is going to be equally important. Jefferson and Madison secretly, through bills called the Kentucky Resolution and the Virginia Resolution, will push the theory of nullification. This is a theory that argues that the state governments can nullify a law passed by the federal government if they consider it to violate the Constitution. And they go back to the old Lockean theory that the government has to have the people's support to govern, and so the states can then reject actions of the federal government. They claim the states have the ultimate authority over the people because they are closer to the people, and they challenge the supremacy clause of the Constitution. And this really highlights their view of the government. They see the states as the repository of power, as opposed to the federal government. This argument failed, but it did succeed in making the Federalists extremely unpopular and promoting the Democratic-Republican position. This extreme polarization at the state and national level would manifest itself in, there's the Jefferson and Madison, the Virginia Resolves and the Kentucky Resolution, will manifest itself in a fight on the floor of Congress between a Democratic Republican from Vermont named Lyon and a Federalist from Connecticut named Griswold. Lyon will spit on Griswold, and a fight will break out in the House of Representatives where they will grab the fire tools and begin beating each other with them while the rest of the House looks on. The election of 1800 is a rematch. It's John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson. The candidates are very restrained, but the supporters take this over the top. Adams and Jefferson actually have a long friendship, although that's been fractured by them running against each other. Jefferson is accused of being a wide-eyed liberal who wants to turn America into France and wants to become a brutal dictator like rose to power in the figure of Robespierre during the French Revolution. Now, this is also, by the way, when we first get the accusations that Jefferson has fathered black children. This was a political smear campaign. People will tell you that it's definitely true that he did now, but that's not actually correct. Somebody in the Jefferson family did. We don't really know if it was Jefferson. Those allegations are born in this campaign as a way to smear Thomas Jefferson. Adams is accused of being a wannabe king, somebody who wants to crown himself and become a tyrant of the United States. The key state in this election is New York State, and so Jefferson runs with Aaron Burr to try to secure New York. Burr is a popular and powerful member of New York. He's a lawyer there. But Burr tries to steal the election. I'll probably explain this in class, but basically they've rigged a system now to make sure that the vice president and the president are of the same party, but it involves one of the electors refusing to vote, so the president can have one more vote than the vice president. Burr probably didn't start this scheme, but agrees to go along with the scheme where the elector who's not supposed to vote votes and creates a tie. When Burr and Jefferson end up in this tie, which never should have happened, the tie break goes to the House of Representatives, which is controlled by the Federalists, that is to say, controlled by Alexander Hamilton. The House votes 36 times and can't come to a decision on who should be president between Burr and Jefferson. Hamilton will eventually decide that as much as he hates everything about Thomas Jefferson, Burr is just too slimy a guy to be president of the United States, and tells the House to support Jefferson, and Jefferson does. Now, of course, ironically, Burr is going to get his revenge on Hamilton a little bit later here. There's Aaron Burr. More on him, because his story's not over and it gets more interesting. Now, this is called the Revolution of 1800 because it's the first time we're going to change parties. The group in power, the Federalists, are going to leave and be replaced by a new group, the Democratic Republicans. Adams, fearing what Jefferson will do, will get Congress to create many more judgeships, and he will fill those judgeships with Federalists. He's trying to pack the judiciary to try to create a branch of the government controlled by the Federalists. The most important of these appointments is John Marshall, who he makes Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Now, Marshall will be one of the 4 or 5 most important people in shaping America. He's up there with Hamilton and Adams and Jefferson and Washington. And we'll talk a lot more about him to come, but remember, he's one of these midnight judges. And they're called the midnight judges or the midnight appointments because Adams literally stays up all night on the last night, his night in the White House, filling out these appointments before his term ends, and then leaves them on the desk for Jefferson to deliver. So he did them at midnight is the idea here. As Jefferson is inaugurated in 1800, the world wonders, will America really be able to follow the mandate of an election by the people? Will one group willingly walk away from power, and will the group that replaces them not seek revenge? And that's what we're going to address in the next chapter. Are we able in this country to peacefully change leadership?